Yes, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are in the world today. Let's start off. My name's Hugo. I'm one of the co-founders of Earth Miles alongside Andrew. This is our second Space for Change that we're doing this year. Very exciting, and I'm very, very excited for this panel of speakers that we have lined up for you today. Now, to kick off, if I can ask everyone just to pop in the chat whereabouts in the world you're dialing in from. That'll be awesome, and I'll just give a shout out to you guys. We've got Brisbane, just from Brisbane. David from Petersham, that's nearby. Hello, David. Catherine from Brisbane, Sharon from Melbourne. We've got a lot of Melbourne people. We've got Toronto. Hey, Joanne, good to see you all the way from Canada, Toronto. We've got Julie from Dunedin, New Zealand. Hey, Julie. We've got Dan up in the Central Coast. We've got Capillary Consulting. I know you've got a real name there. Dialing in all the way from Canada, Melbourne. Okay, so we've got a lot of, where are all the Sydney people? Okay, we've got Julie from Sydney. Julie, so good to see you.
Yeah. Hey, Julie.
Awesome. And I see there's still more people coming in. I'll let them come in, but let's get started. So today we're going to be talking about bridging the gap in change leadership. And I'm very excited to have these panelists joining us this morning. So we've got Gilbert from Cuneo Consulting, Jem from Salesforce, Kathy, a change leader and coach, and Lauren, the CEO from Leading Edge Global. So let's start. Let's get this show happening. Over to you, Andrew.
Thank you, Hugo, and thank you everyone who's joined us across the globe. Really good to see you all. We've got quite a fantastic turnout and people still coming in. So this topic is a very interesting one. It's not a new one, but it seems to keep coming up, and thank you to this community for voting for it. So Hugo and I were battling a little bit. We were discussing over the weekend, how do we introduce this topic of change leadership and change management? And our first impulse, oh, hello.
Hello.
Hi. Great to have you on board. And our knee-jerk reaction was leadership versus management. And we thought, well, is that really true? So we got back to basics and we went way back old school to good old Peter Drucker, who's considered one of the godfathers of management consulting. And we came across this quote that management is doing things right, whereas leadership is doing the right things. And the more we paused on it and the more we sat on it, we thought, maybe this is a good way to introduce the topic simply and relate it more to change. Because in change, we know that doing the things right often is around the science of change. It's our approaches, it's our methodologies, it's our benefits realization. It's all those things that we take in theoretically and conceptually to do the right things in the right way for change. Versus leadership is something more. It's not just getting stuff done right. It's probably tying in a little bit more to the art of change. So we all speak about the art and science of change, which requires more vision, more empathy, more facilitation, co-creation, innovation, and more importantly, influence. And sometimes those things sit within our ambit of control, and sometimes they don't. So where Hugo and I landed with our team was they're probably two complementary forces and two sides of the same triangle. And we need both, because if we can get the balance right between doing the right things in management and, leadership and, doing the right things in leadership and doing things right in management, things just become amazing. So we wanted to position this up front that we're not saying if you consider yourself a change manager, that's bad and a leader is good. We need both of these forces to get things right. And that's how we thought we'd kick us off. But before we meet the panel, we would love to hear from you first. So by way of polling, please grab your phones. We've got a QR scanner here, or go to ahaslides.com/space12345. And we want to know from you, which side do you personally lead? And this is all anonymous, so no issue there. But are you more on the managing side? Is that your comfort zone? Or are you more on the leading side? You've got to have a preference somewhere. And whereabouts are you in your career at the moment? So votes are coming in. Sure, at the moment, it doesn't look like we've got a lot of managers out there. Who's doing the work? All right, so with this group quite high up, so we've got an average of about, let's say, 3.5 there. So this group's leading more to the leaning. Wonderful. Thank you for that. Next question. What aspects of change do you believe is most effectively handled in your organization? Do we do the leadership well? Or do we do the management well? Or are we doing both well? Or are both terrible? Let's see what the group says. A lot in the pink there, hey? So we got a lot of us leaning on the leadership side, but we're saying that our organization isn't coming along with us. 48%. There's a small amount saying that there's both. So it looks like the biggest groups here is management, where we're facing into organizations that love the planning, the execution. But we seem to have a bit of lacking with the leadership as well as just both being effectively handled. So that's quite powerful. Wonderful. Thank you for your responses. And final question. What are the core skills needed? Let's get really practical. If you're going to leap from management to leadership, what is that gap about in terms of skills? How do we need to be showing up? And what is that missing skill to elevate management into leadership? Empathy. I thought that would come up. I love it. Inspiration. I love it. Authenticity, trust, humility. So it's quite interesting, hey? Storytelling, these are all human skills. And I know often when Hugo and I run our courses and when we train our people, we can't forget these human skills, because every time we ask this question to communities, a lot of these skills are not in the technical. And it sounds like we've got leadership groups out there that certainly need to embrace it. We've got facilitation. I love that. We've got trust, ambiguity, clarifying vision for the future. So really art stuff, not necessarily science stuff, but more on the art side of that equation we showed a little bit earlier. Hey, I'm going to try this new AI feature, if you don't mind. It says group the answers by meaning. Let's have a look what happens here. And we're getting the ring of death. All right, there we go. So when we group them, it's very much into humanness, empathy, vision, influence, integrity, ambiguity, and storytelling. And I'll just ungroup it there. There was a little bit of AI there to summarize for us. All right, folks. Well, thank you for that. And without further ado, I'm going to just stop sharing. And let's chat to our panel. Hugo, can we spotlight our panel? We've got the amazing Gilbert. We've got Jem. We've got Kathy. And so I can see Jem. I can see Gilbert. I can't see Kathy yet. Oh, where did Kathy go? Oh, there you are. I can see Kathy. And just want to make sure everyone. And there's Lauren. Okay. Wonderful. So, folks, thank you so much for being on board and tackling this really interesting topic our communities involved. We're going to have a bit of a warm-up question, if that's okay. So, warm-up question, quick sort of answers. Let's go around starting with Gilbert. But the question is, aliens have just invaded planet Earth and they've landed. And proverbially, they ask us, take me to your leader, or rather command us, take me to your leader. Who on Earth would you take them to? If you had aliens on planet Earth, and I know it's a very interesting time to be a human on planet Earth, who would you take them to as your leader? So I'm going to start with Gilbert. Gilbert, where would you take aliens if they were asking you to take them to their leader?
I would take them to a group of young people. I would take them to where young people congregate. I don't know. I'm not a young person, so I wouldn't know. But I would take them there and ask them, like, here's the future. Talk to them. They have the answers. We'll help them make that happen. Hopefully they like that.
Yeah. It's like tying onto a bit of a value there. I love that, Gilbert. Thank you. Jem, what's your answer? Who would you take aliens to?
Yeah, so for me, a good leader is someone who's resilient, empathetic, adaptable. And I'm also a really big sports enthusiast. So I thought about all those features, and Serena Williams is the person who came to mind for me as a good leader. Just because of everything she embodies, and she won a Grand Slam when she was pregnant as well, which I think is just amazing. So that's,
oh my God,
that's what I probably
that is cool. Thanks, Jem. What about you, Kathy P?
Well, Andrew, I'm all about self-leadership, so I would take them to myself. I'd say you're looking at your leader.
Great answer. Oh, thank you, Kathy. And Lauren, who would you take aliens to if they asked you, take me to your leader?
Well, I like what was called out about, vision and integrity and empathy, and therefore I would definitely take it to a woman. And
Cheeky.
look, we've had some amazing historical leaders in the past. I think I don't know. I suppose I like some of our political leaders who get out there, and I won't call it any names. I know people are a little bit funny on the fence, but I love women political leaders who get out there and absolutely say what they feel.
Oh, I love it. Awesome. We need more of that, hey? Men and women saying what they feel, maybe. All right. So thank you for that. Let's get into our topic of change leadership and change management and bridging this gap. So Gilbert, I've known you for years and I've admired the content you put out there. It's so creative, it's so out there, but it's so useful and purposeful. But also I love chatting to you about this topic because you're a bit of you think about things a little bit differently. And that's what I always appreciate about your content that you put out there in our conversations. And when we were talking about this topic, you were saying that, why are we still talking about this? This is not a new topic. We've had years of executive coaching. We've had lots of leadership programs, all this kind of stuff. So I guess my question to you is, why are we still struggling with this concept of management and leadership and change? And what are the components missing in our current approaches to develop these leaders in change?
I'll just solve that worldwide 30-year-long problem in 2 minutes, shall I?
Great.
Well, I've got opinions, as everyone on the call, and I've seen some very dear and longtime friends on the call as well. So welcome everyone that I already know, and welcome to everyone that I haven't yet met. I think I've got 4 key points. Like, we often give them very little guidance or handrails, even if it's their first time being a change lead. And we just expect them to know things just because you're a leader. And we know that we need what we need of them, but somehow expect them to just know what to do. And it's my experience that they often don't. And it's amazing how often I get startled or sheepish looks from my colleagues when I was like, did we give them a one-pager, like a job description? They were like, no. So that would be my first point. Give them a job description, something that they can hold on to. Go like, okay, this is what you want from me. Because there's often a will, but not often a plan. We set incredibly high standards for change leaders that we can often not even accomplish ourselves. I've been guilty of that. I will easily admit that. But the thinking, sorry, seems to be that because they get paid more than we do, that they should be better at it. Sort of like you bought your way into being smart about change. I don't think it works that way. And we're change professionals. This is our job. They are managers and leaders looking after change. Understanding change is just not their core skill set. So it's about that expectation that we have of them. That's the second one. We're still teaching theories and practices from the 80s and 90s. Just this morning, I saw a post about the change models, 15 most leading, and most of them were 20 to 25, sometimes even 40 years old. It's just no longer fit for purpose. What we needs to be focused on deliverables, milestones, and scorecards for a leader to make sense. And the previous models are just not meeting that standard anymore. And then last, we keep telling them, often in a very loud voice, because that will make them understand us better, I think, that they are doing it all wrong and they need more training, more reading, more practice, more anything really. But they have very little time, just like us. So maybe a bit more compassion would help there.
And I love the points on compassion, because there is, there's different standards of leadership. There's the gap between us as change leaders versus leaders in the business. And I know personally, I can't do this alone. I need the support of leaders around me. So what should we be doing differently with organizational leaders to prepare them better for change? You've touched on some really good tools there, but let's go into that a little bit more.
And I am obviously talking about leaders who are sane and who are not corporate psychos, because we all know them and we just avoid them and try to get away from them as fast as possible, because nothing that you will do will help. And I've just heard a story yesterday about a person who's like, just get out because it's crazy. But my tips would be for people who are actually willing to do a good job, which is most of them. So I would start by sharing more positive examples for them to draw on, instead of the scary cautionary tales we always tell, but they almost never happen outside of LinkedIn. And for every out of touch crying CEO or exec throwing a tantrum about return to work, there's thousands and thousands of executives and leaders who are trying to do the right thing. They're just looking for some help. So that would be my first thing, but give them some positive examples to draw on that they can actually relate to, not some CEO of a global imperium. It's not their reality. Create project induction packs for them and tailor to their needs, time pressures and skill level. So they get a project induction pack that actually answers the questions that they have, makes them much more ready and able to go out there and talk to people. They are often your biggest asset and strongest champions. So spend a few hours on that. It's an investment that always pays off. And then third, don't go for easy solutions and simple explanations. We all know that's not how change works anymore. We like to go to an executive leader and go like, it's really simple. Here, follow this 3, 5, 7-step model, and then you'll all be fine. So that's what they remember. And they equate simplicity to things being really easy. But it's not. Change is not easy, and we shouldn't tell them that it is. So complexity, dependencies, capacity, realistic expectations. Those are key topics to discuss with them and keep top of mind. You want them to see and understand the magic that makes change work and help build the change leaders of the future. Nothing is more important than that. That's my challenge to everyone. Despite their many quirks and annoying habits of the leaders, try to be compassionate. Most leaders are people just like you and me, just trying to do a good job. And if you give them the right tools, they will do it.
I love that. I love that. And I mean, you even touched on social media and how perhaps that's also jarring our perception and focusing on the negative. And I loved your shift into let's think about positive examples out there so that they can model it better and we can model it better. I think that really hit me quite nicely. What's the C-suite's kind of involvement in this? And how do we engage them specifically on change leadership versus management? What's your thoughts there, Gilbert?
I'm always a little bit divided on this because I like to just treat people as grown-ups. And sometimes when people don't behave like that for whatever reason, it's often stress related, like they don't have time, so they throw a tantrum. It's like, I need a one-pager, I need it now. It's like, well, okay, quality will be reflective of the time that you gave me. But again, let's assume that people are there to learn and to do a good job. I try to make a pact with them and gain their trust to show them that I'm on their side and offer help. Like I'm here to make you look good, to make the change work. If you help me, I'll help you. Change is often not their expertise, and no one likes to look ignorant. At least that's not my experience. People often feel a little bit embarrassed. And I know it's a little bit manipulative, but sometimes I butter them up a little bit and say like, look, it's not you, change, but we have a lot of other people to communicate with, and not everybody is as savvy and knowledgeable. So after a while, when you've had a couple of meetings with them, they start to get it. They start to draw their own conclusions. And of course, this is a lot to do with you as the facilitator, trying to find out like, this is something they need to know. This is something they need to get right. But it works more often than not. And for the good of the cause, I think it's a little white lie that you might tell from the start. And then by the end of the project, they will learn a lot about change and they become a champion in their own right.
Wonderful. Oh, Gilbert, so much wisdom there. I'm going to put a pin in that for the moment and move to Kathy P. Kathy, also alumni from our accelerator program. We've worked together behind the scenes as well. What I love about you is you not only are a great change leader, but you're also a netball coach. And you do a lot in agile sports and creating links between good sporting principles and how we play the game of change. So can we draw any analogies, experience from this world of netball into this conversation of change leadership? I'd love to start there with you, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yes, I am a netball coach, an amateur netball coach, so you won't see me on the TV.
Not yet.
Not yet. But I think for me, when I first started coaching netball, one of the things that I was introduced to was this idea of performance practice, which is actually by this Australian guy called Wayne Goldsmith. And what he talks about is that it's not enough to just learn a skill. We need to learn how to do a skill well, while under pressure, under fatigue, and perform that skill consistently. And when I think about that in terms of the modern workplace and change, I think it's exactly the same. What happens is we're asking our workforce to receive change consistently while they're under pressure and feeling fatigued. So to me, what that means is that we really need to start to focus on change capability in all of the people within the organization so that they are better equipped to themselves through change.
Wow. Okay, so it's focusing then on the individual. So can you go deeper into that? Do you have specific examples where you focused on that individual capability and it actually made a difference in change leadership?
Yeah. I'm going to throw out another sports metaphor, so apologies,
Right.
everybody.
We love metaphors. We're in change.
So I think a lot of the time what we do through delivery of projects is we're focusing on the throw of the ball. So, you know, it's really about how we throw the ball, and we'll go around and we'll meet with people and we'll teach them about what they need to do to catch that actual pass that's coming to them. But what we need to do is increase the skills in terms of, like, you know, catching consistently. So for me, how we do that is we actually tuck in some change capability through our project delivery. So when we're going around and we're talking to people about change and talking to them about the, you know, change that they're about to receive, we actually can build in some understanding about the way people experience change. And I know that Jem's going to talk about the SCARF model later, but I think that that's a brilliant model to introduce to people to kind of raise that knowledge about, you know, how individuals experience change. But I really think that we have opportunities as change practitioners and people that are delivering change to uplift just general knowledge, because we know that, you know, we need to be aware of something first before we can actually start to put those skills into action. So we can lift the knowledge about, you know, why do we feel the way we feel when change is coming at us fast and consistently, and how can we build that change capability throughout the organization.
And when we say change capability throughout the organization, what are we really talking about there? Because, you know, us as change practitioners, we know we've got to be continuous learners, but for your average leader or your average manager, what might that mean?
I spent some time thinking about this, Andrew, because I was like, you know, if I wanted to boil it down to what are the skills I think are really important, for me, there's definitely curiosity. So getting people to lean into curiosity, you know, and there's that great quote about, like, you know, being curious and not judgmental. So, you know, I think if we can raise curiosity in any way we can and try and get people running towards the change, right? Like, again, another sporting analogy is we say you never catch a ball standing still, right? Like, you know, you've got to be moving towards the plate. You've got to be moving towards the ball. So it's the same kind of thing. We want people to get curious and start to ask questions, right? Like, you know, don't wait to be delivered. Don't wait for the town hall. Don't wait for all of that stuff. Go ask. In organizations, these big projects that are coming, they're not a secret, right? Like, you know, there's not people sitting there saying, like, you know, don't tell them. And if they are, that's bad change. So we want people curious and coming towards us. Testing and learning, so that kind of, like, you know, ability to try and fail and then learn from that. So I think there's a reflection piece there. There's definitely skills around self-awareness, and I think that's understanding both intent and impact. And I think that if we can start to talk to people about, like, you know, what the intent is and what the impact is, then people can also start to think about that themselves. Like, what's my intent when I interact with something, and what's the impact that I actually have? And of course, there's empathy, design thinking, and compassion. So they would be the skills that I would focus on in terms of more capable change.
I love that, because we think about that a lot. It's that ability to co-create. It's that ability to have those human skills to interact. I love you've mentioned the SCARF model, and I think digital is becoming more important as well. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think that's, like, you know, it's curiosity and test and learn, right? So, you know, let's have a play around with them. You know, we can't break them. So get in, have a go, and see what we can learn.
Exactly. Wonderful. And is there anything from a change leader or change manager's point of view that we should be including in our frameworks? You've mentioned SCARF, but is there anything else that we can do to help make change stick and help people catch that ball?
So I think that part of it is we've got to start to shift away from this mindset of, you know, and Gilbert mentioned it about really old change models. So, you know, Lewin and that kind of thinking of, you know, we're in a frozen state and then we unfreeze and make the change and then we refreeze. I think that change people start to challenge that and say, no, like, you know, change is continuous. It's going to keep coming. So how can we really start to change that mindset around change for both leaders, you know, hierarchical leaders, but also everybody within the organization that's receiving change? It becomes that, like, you know, well, what's next and how do I get myself ready?
Amazing. Love that, Kathy. Thank you. I'm going to move to Jem now. Jem, good to see you. Jem's another amazing alumni. We met when you did our accelerator course, right? Because you're part of a human-centered design change team. Yeah. And you're a continuous learner as well. So since then, you've gone into a lot of amazing warp holes of neuro leadership, neuroscience. So really good to have you on board. How are you doing today?
Thanks, Andrew. Yes, good. I'm excited to share some hopefully insightful knowledge with everybody.
Amazing. So look, we can't really talk about leadership these days without touching on something around neuro leadership and how the brain works. So really good to have you here. So from a neuroscience perspective, how might we start unpacking this topic of change leadership and change management? What's your views, Jem?
Yeah. So for me, leadership is really about empowering others and giving people autonomy to work together. I'm really inspired to guide people through the change, whereas change management is much more around that tactical implementation. So when we use that neuroscience or that brain-based approach, it really helps us take into consideration human behavior, emotions, decision-making, and stress responses. So when people are really empowered to lead themselves, it's a totally different experience with totally different outcomes. And the more awareness that we have as change professionals around the brain and the change experience, the better we will be at guiding people through the change and getting it right, and less likely to have to go and redo it because the right people have been empowered to really be part of the change. And then if I think back to, I'm currently on a project, which is a sort of large scale digital transformation project. And I'm at that stage where I'm putting together the strategy. So when I'm thinking around like what sort of neuroscience perspective I can kind of bring into this, I'm spending a lot of time having discussions with like a variety of people so they can feel a lot more empowered. I'm facilitating a lot of sessions to really draw out how they might feel about the change, and how it could really be help them be more efficient and help them ultimately have a better experience with their clients and the people that they work with. And this is really not only just creating a sense of empowerment, but really a greater sense of meaning and sort of belonging, and a greater reward state when it comes to the change. So when I think about some of the projects I've worked on sort of more broadly, when we've considered those brain responses, or we've taken that into consideration, the right people have been more empowered. We've had a lot more successful outcomes, which not only means that we get people up and running and we're a lot more successful, but generally people are less stressed and we have a much more positive experience around the change altogether.
Love that. So if I distill that a little bit, are there some fundamental skills or approaches in change that we can play with that are a bit more brain friendly, that allow us to then elevate from, say, just managing tactical to getting into that more inspiring, curious, safe space? What are your thoughts, Jem?
Yeah, so for our brain's primary job is really to keep us safe, keep us alive, maximize reward, minimize risk. It's really a prediction machine using physical sensations and our surroundings and past experiences to analyze what's going to be a threat to us and what's going to be a reward to us. So fundamentally, as change leaders, we want people's brains to feel safe, because when they don't, their stress brain is in the driver's seat and good thinking isn't available. So this is where that human-centered design approach is so powerful as a change leadership approach. Because it's so inclusive, it empowers people to be part of the future solution rather than just receiving it. In the brain, this signals autonomy, safety, and reduces that perceived risk. So importantly, we want people to be heard or feel like their opinions matters, and they're not just having that change thrust upon them. So think about the difference between being told that you need to work in the office 9 to 5, 5 days a week, which I think a lot of people can relate to. And then think about how different you would feel if you could set your own schedule, your own location, and you had more control over your time and over what that experience might be. Even if you decided that 5 days a week is what works best for you, your experience and your perception is likely to be very different because you were in control of that. You made that decision and you would generally feel a lot more psychologically safe. And I guess like another good example is when I think back to some of the projects that I've worked on, where the executive sponsor has made the decision and not consulted, there's generally been a lot more resentment and fear around the change.
Mm.
I think back to how I might lead change. I'm spending a lot more time in that setup with the sponsors, helping them understand the brain-based approach. And generally, it's a lot more powerful with a lot better outcomes. So some things that I would think about around how do we give people that autonomy and elevate management, change management to change leadership. So I'd think around like bringing the people served by change into the decision-making process, avoiding that top-down approach, people lots of choices, and co-creating the change journey. And this is really around facilitating those discussions with the people experiencing the change. So you're really capturing and understanding their needs and designing it based on what works best for those people.
Love that, Jem. And any sort of practical toolkits? I mean, I know Kathy mentioned SCARF. Did you want to double click on that?
Yeah. So yeah, I just wanted to dive into SCARF a little bit more because it's such a good model to understand.
What makes it good? Because every time I say SCARF, people are like, "Oh, it's amazing." What makes it good from you? Like, let's sort of sell it to the audience in a sense. Don't worry, we don't make money from SCARF, by the way. Just
and I've actually also seen a few variations of SCARF, but it all kind of means the same sort of thing. But essentially, what makes it good? It's really simple. It's really effective. So to kind of give you some context for people who don't maybe know what SCARF is, it's looking at 5 different domains that can kind of help you sense check your change approach and make sure you're making the right choices. So each of the 5 domains are basically an example of human experience that can trigger either a threat or a reward response in the brain. So those domains are status, our sense of importance relative to others. So that's the S for SCARF. Certainty, our ability to predict the future. Autonomy, our sense of control over events. That's very much what I was sort of diving into today. Relatedness, how safe and connected we feel to others, and fairness, our perception of fair exchanges between people. And every individual has varying needs based on those domains. For example, personally, autonomy and relatedness is a really high need for myself. So if I'm going through a change and I don't feel like I've got control or I'm not very connected, then my threat response can be really activated and I feel really, really uneasy. And I've actually got a good example of this, of how the SCARF model kind of played out in my own life recently, because a few months ago, I was told I had to move out of my apartment. I was given like 10 days to do this, didn't know where I was going to go, didn't know how it was going to happen. And my brain just went into this massive response. And it felt like a rug had been pulled out from underneath me. And psychologically, I was not okay. And when I thought about the SCARF framework, I was like, well, it's really not surprising I've had that response because I've lost my autonomy over this situation. I've been told where I need to go, when I need to go, how it's going to be happening to me. I'm leaving my community, so that sense of sort of relatedness and connections going. Felt like it was a bit unfair, uncertain on my future. So all of those elements of the SCARF framework and those domains were all being like strongly activated. So you can see why that change in my personal life had a really big impact on me. And it's the same with all those changes that people experience in the organization as well. So I guess when you're thinking about leading change in your organization, think about all those domains in the SCARF framework. And I recommend just Googling it as well, just to go have a refresher around what it all means. But yeah, keep that at your top of mind. Think about those 5 domains and think about how you can move people from a threat space to a reward space in each of those different elements.
I love that. I can see how using those domains shifts the conversation out of the tactile into more of the leadership. We need to care about people and do the right thing. Thank you for that. And let's move to the amazing Lauren Ryder. Lauren, so good to see you.
Thanks so much for having us.
Oh, so good to have you. Finally, you're on one of our Earth Space for Changes. Good to have you. Lauren, we were chatting about this topic and you mentioned something that stuck with me called the frozen middle. And could you unpack that a little bit more for the audience in context of our topic?
Yeah, look, I think if you haven't heard about this, you certainly have experienced this. Basically, and it's kind of an older idea where we've got this whole level of middle management who actually refuses to change. They're resistant, they're the ones pushing back, they're the ones who are sort of barriers to transformation. And you know, it's funny because it actually is exactly what Jem was just saying, was that the reason that they are pushing back is because they don't want to change. And so that's fine. So what is the reason? We have to start unpacking that. And the thing is, their KPIs are literally designed around ensuring that their entire team, everything works all the time. It's around that they don't change, right? How can they perform if things are constantly moving? And on top of that, most leaders you'll find actually care really deeply about their team and they want to protect them at all cost. You layer on top of that, you know, they've probably been through some really poorly managed change projects. And so, you know, if you think about it, they're probably pretty hesitant to come on board with this project until they know that this thing is actually going to work. So you've kind of got this interesting tug of war. You've got this whole middle management, and you know, usually they know they need to change and that they kind of want to, but they also don't want to make ripples, and they also want to make sure that their team remains stable and isn't going to kick up a fuss, right? So, you know, I suppose we have to ask the question why. Like, why does this happen, and why do they not have these change leadership skills? And you know, if you look at it, you've got a lot of sort of C-suite or even, you know, senior leaders, and they're asked by either their CEO or their boss to go ahead and lead this change or transformation or what have you. And the thing is, they're not actually given a guidebook. They're just expected to know what to do.
Yes.
And you know, what happens is companies actually focus more on these change management process. They go, oh, we need a change manager to do this. And so they do that. They expect the change manager is just going to be able to do everything, but they can't. The change leader has their role. And so it's actually a lack of understanding, I think, organizationally, to be able to fill this gap where we actually need change leaders.
Love that. Absolutely. So unfreezing that frozen middle is really understanding them, getting into that a bit more. And I love how you've touched on the why. I think change leadership is really getting down to the why they're resisting or why it's an issue. So what the group mentioned around empathy becomes really, really critical. Look, you've had one of the most interesting careers because you've been in the Middle East, you've been all over the world, similar to me. And I just love your perspective. What have you seen globally that works to support change leadership and elevating or increasing that beyond just management? What works for you?
I think first of all, the most important thing is that we start by clarifying those two roles. What is change management? What is change leadership? And Andrew, you actually pulled it out exactly right, just on that first slide. You know, well, it's about just saying like management, you know, it's about kind of, you know, the science, the stability, the process. That's what a change manager does. They put that stability, they understand what needs to happen next, and they help it through. Whereas that leadership really is about that vision and direction and that empathy and the influence. You actually do need both. And so a change manager needs to be able to come in and say, look, this is my role and this is your role. And I'm going to say something that, you know, it can be a little bit of a hard pill to swallow for a lot of change managers, but change management actually has a ceiling. Like there's only a little bit of influence that you actually can have, right? There's a lot of the change managers here are contractors, right? But even those of you who are in a permanent role, you actually have a limited realm of authority, right? And that's the reason that when we have a big transformation, we have a CTO, a Chief Transformation Officer, because that is someone who can actually influence their peers. So if you do feel like you're pushing shit uphill every day, it's because you are. So how we
if it feels like shit, it probably is.
Well, that's it. But the fact is it doesn't actually need to be like that, because the fact is you need to, as a change manager, you need to use your influential skills to influence those execs and to support those leaders and go, it's okay for me to have a specific role. And this is about that scarf thing, right? So if I'm going to tell you right now, hey, as a change manager, you need to sort of stop expecting that you're going to, you know, change this culture single-handedly. You're going to push back to me. But if I tell you positively, your role is to influence, to understand, to talk to people, to drive these leaders to be better, you're going to come on board and go, yeah, Lauren, actually, I think there's something in what you just said, right? So there's a bit of that. We can draw all of these things together. So really, I think it is about kind of, you know, understanding what the roles, responsibilities are and bringing those skills to the table and pushing where it actually makes sense, where you're actually going to change the dial.
Which kind of makes sense to me. If I take change out of the equation completely, and we're just talking about a manager and a leader, or management and leadership. Leadership's certainly about working with and through others. So I love that you've called out the ceiling for change management. I've never heard that before. I think it's a bitter pill, but all good medicine is bitter. And what I'm hearing is, for us to elevate, we've actually got to influence. We've got to influence the influencers in a sense. Call it champions, call it sponsors. We've got labels from all those older methodologies Gilbert mentioned earlier, but they're still valid. They're still valid. So I'm really, really loving that. So how do you approach this? You know, let's get practical for our audience. You walk into a client, there's all this going on, big transformation. How do you go about breaking that ceiling, firstly, and start engaging that, or igniting the fire of leadership?
Yeah, sure. So maybe I'll describe it through, you know, a case study / you know, what I actually practically would do and some examples and experiences. So what I have is a program that I call leader-led change. And how it came about was I got called into lead a big transformation, and I've been thinking for a while, you know, maybe this will work. I think leaders probably do need to drive change. And on the other hand, I was like super busy at the time, and I was like, I can commit to a few days a week for you. So let's see if we can make this thing work for you in a way that also works for me. And so what I did was I approached it coming in as myself, a change management, change leadership, coming in, or change the lead was the role. I need to be an expert advisor. I need to be trusted. And think about, like, one project was huge transformation. I'm talking about op model changes, sales process, marketing materials, Salesforce changes. And the biggest one was every employee had to change how they talk, how they think. We're shifting mindsets and behaviors. And normally you would go, yeah, let's just chuck a whole big change management team on that. But they weren't going to do that. And I told them they didn't need to. So what did we do? I approached it at a few levels. So the first thing is sitting in with the sponsor. So as a change manager, you need to coach that sponsor and tell you what's expected of them. And it's deep. You've got to get a really deep, trusted relationship with your sponsor. And there's a couple of things you need to do. First of all, help them to create that vision. Make sure it's clear. You can't help create a vision. You know, this is one of your key skills in your bucket, right? So help them to create it, right? And then give them a personal comms plan. Right. So it needs to align the messaging to the program comms plan, but they need a person. When they go into the elevator, what are they going to say? Right. When they go into a meeting and someone goes, hey, how's that program? They've got to have a one-liner that they've got to explain. And you've got to help them with that, how they can uplift the project. Remind them that they've got to repeat it all the time. They're going to get sick of hearing their own voice. And that's the hard thing, because they kind of get bored. They get like shiny object, and they're like, yeah, you got to keep them focused. That's in your other job. And also remind them to celebrate the wins, because that's super
so important.
Yeah. So that's kind of how I approach the sponsor. And it's about making sure you've got your regular updates. If they miss your regular updates, push them into having another one. Like you and the sponsor need to be absolutely hand in glove together. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, which is what I do with the leaders. So first of all, your sponsor has to trust you to say, I'm taking all of your leaders onto a one-day training course, and they have to trust you to do that. And so then I run a whole day training with them, and it's about change leadership, not change management, change leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And then once we roll that out, then we support that by coaching. And, you know, what's really important is that if we can start as early as possible, I know change managers often get involved late, but as early as you can do it, you want to get in there before the change is being rolled out, because you know that it's going to rock the boat. So you need to say to your leaders, hey, it's going to be rocky. Let's figure out our status quo today. And then when you build that trust, when things do happen, they'll come to you. And that's really important. You want to be trusted as a change manager, so that leaders come to you so you can use that influence with like all that cool information you're picking up from them, right? So look, if I think about kind of the skills in that training course, what's really important, obviously change 101, you can hit some of the key pieces, but I think emotional intelligence is a huge one. So we cover a whole model, we make them take a quiz, we talk about all the different aspects of it, and we, you know, we measure it, we keep coming back. That's really important, and covering that with empathy. Also how to communicate during change. And we also, interestingly, we do cover the SCARF model, but we actually call it the social model. So I think, Jen, you mentioned that people call it
social, yes.
But the reason that we love that one is because it has an L at the end, which stands for love. And that love means belonging. And the belonging means psychological safety. And to me, that is the most important thing. You want to have your team. If you're a leader, right? And you're leading your people and you're taking them through change. You need for them to go and understand that it's a safe environment, for them to come up and go, this isn't working for me. I don't like this. I'm not okay right now. And you want all those information, all that data coming straight through the leaders and then come back to you, because they're not going to come to the change manager with that. So that's really, really important.
Oh, love it.
Yeah.
Awesome. So look, as we get into this, how about we open up for a bit of a Q&A? I think we've already got one. I think Gilbert's already replied to one. Rebecca Cox says, I'm curious if there's anyone looking into how some contexts are becoming or needing to become more like responsive systems, as in change being the usual. So not there's this change and then we go back to normal, but change as usual. So more of an everyday thing for everyone, including managers. So what are your thoughts on that? Who on the panel would like to grab that one?
I can speak to that one.
Right.
So I think similar to what Lauren was talking about, you know, when I'm talking to people about change, I always start with the premise that change, organizational change is a team sport, and talk about the various roles that are needed to make change successful. And that includes the sponsor, the people leader, like that hierarchical role, because that's definitely important. Change advocates, change enablers, the change manager. Then I also talk about the change agent, so the project team, like they're in that as well, and then the people changing, and having a look at what are the skills that are needed from all of those groups to help respond to changes as they're coming through. So that whole idea of that every change is different, the different things that people need to do and the different skills they need to have to help introduce change in a much more complex adaptive system.
So it's almost like building this readiness through this approach to do that. Gilbert, what are your thoughts? I see you got your hand up.
Yeah, you took the first word that I was going to say. That readiness part.
Yes.
That's definitely true. I would be a little bit cautious here because our aspirations as humans often outpace our capabilities. Where we go like, oh yeah, no, change is so constant. Everyone is just all about change now, and the fact that we're continuously surrounded by things doesn't mean that we've absorbed it, that we've learned about it. Brings me back to the point that I made earlier that, oh, change has been around forever. You as a leader, you as a manager, you as a whoever person, staff member, you should just know this by now. And I think that assumption is really, really dangerous. So unless an organization has an agreed language or an agreed set of practices, yes, I think it's important to embrace the change and to just roll with it and see what it does for the organization. But to move slowly if you're not quite that skilled, because I've made that mistake before where you think like, oh no, they're all good because they say so. And then you start running and it turns out that people can't even walk properly.
I agree. And it's perception versus reality. And sometimes I mean, I'm at a massive organization at the moment, and there's such a disconnect between sort of the expectation of how quickly you can do things at an executive because they see the broader macro risks versus the reality of allowing people to digest, read, understand, think through these things. So this change readiness becomes something, and I think it's probably got to do with commitment. It's probably got to do a lot with also capacity. Like we all want to be change ready, but we have to do change on the side of our desks. And I think a lot of people are talking about it. So I'm glad this was raised by Rebecca. I think the more change we do and the more we help our clients with change get better and better at it, the more they get more resilient. As long as they need to stay and they don't have a high attrition. So that's where psychological safety comes in. Dan says, can we dig a little deeper into SCARF or neuroscience with clear change resistor? I know we're going to share something on that, but I see Michelle's jumped into that one, or Michelle's all over that one. Gilbert, I agree. Any other questions? Okay, so the question there was, is there a clear example where we use SCARF to help with the resistor? Has anyone seen that? Or social?
So I think the other part of SCARF, you know, we've spoken about it in terms of understanding that threat response, but we can also use SCARF to unpack what's the reward response. So there's the two parts to it, right? Like, you know, so I think that when we're looking at change programs, if we go through SCARF, like, you know, or social, and have a look at it, well, what would be the conditions that I need to create to pull people towards reward? Like, you know, rather than the threat. So there's the two sides of the model, the threat and the reward.
The threats and the reward. So I like that. So instead of using it to address resistance, you're saying you've reframed it to address something more positive, that these are the conditions that we need to address that resistance.
I'd like to add to that. So I think SCARF is an awesome model as a model. And I think we talk about this. Like it's more about kind of understanding how the human brain works and how it reacts. But when we're talking about things like addressing resistance, I'm not sure that a model is going to help you with that. But what I think is probably your best skill is empathy and active listening and actually sitting down with someone. If somebody is resistant, it's about talk to me. And look, Simon Sinek has so much information on this if anyone wants to watch this. But he just said, you said, what's the challenge? Tell me more. Yep, that's interesting. Keep going. You just basically open up for someone.
How specifically?
He called it emptying the bucket. And I love that because somebody will actually get all the way down to the bottom of what their level of resistance is. So, you know, once you get that and then you unpack it and you go, now I know why they're actually resisting. Then you can go ahead and use your, you know, you can sort of go, here's your carrot and here's how we're going to, you know, give you some, you know, feedback. So this is how I'm going to make it work for you. But I think the model is more about just as an understanding tool.
Love it. And I'm with you on that. Is often it's the practice of empathy. Often it's the practice. And when we overhauled our capability program, we realized that there's 4 non-negotiables you have to have at that one-to-one resistance level. Is one, you need independence. So if you are emotionally involved in this with that person, it's very hard to sort of hold the space for that person if you're also going to lose something in this change. We said it's rapport. So it's being absolutely present and giving that person 100% focus first to create that space. And then from what you said is questioning, and not just asking random questioning, but using questions in an active, practical way to help them fully understand. They've said a problem well stated is a problem well solved. So that was definitely a one. And I can't remember the last one. Hugo, what was the last one on the 4 non-negotiables after questions?
Oh, good quiz.
Oh man, we'll have to share it in the group and the community. I did see a hand go up earlier by Jess. Jess, did you have a question? Well, there was a Jess. Any other questions? Let's have one more question from the group. Jess is nope. Thanks, Jess. Some people don't even know why they feel uncomfortable about change. So remember that when we can't address all resistance or all internal factors, we can change. We're leaders, not therapists. We can design the change for how it sticks. So maybe it's both. It's having good models at a more conceptual how I'm going to approach this, and having good human skills that we all as a community put together at the beginning of this and have unpacked in this to get it going. Joanne, I see you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. And it's so lovely to hear from amazing insights from the panel there, some of which I'm familiar with. And I just wanted to add, and I put that in the chat, a common theme I would like to add to what everyone is saying, and that's taken into consideration the environmental context. So if I think of the sports analogy, Kathy, I can relate, being a hockey coach and player, where if I look at the weather, the conditions, the team you're playing against, if you have your, high goal scoring team members on the bench, context puts into how you perform. And overall, when we're looking at leaders, as an example with the scarf, as Jen mentioned, well, yes, it depends on the environmental context if it brings out the best in me as a leader or it challenges me. So I think everyone has shared this in some shape or form, and it's that environmental context that brings out our strengths as a leader or challenges us as a leader. But I really wanted to thank you all because it reminded me of the impact of that environment that has on how we perform and others around us.
Wonderful. Amazing. Thanks, Joanne. Always love your views and so good to see you back at Space for Change. We're going to have you on board one day, Joanne.
Anytime, Andrew.
All right, let's make that happen. All right, well, I want to say a huge thank you to our panel, Gilbert, Jim, Kathy, Lauren. You're absolutely fantastic. I'm going to hand over to Hugo to wrap us up, but before I do then, thank you for sharing your wisdom. Thank you for waking up early this morning to share all this. And we really appreciate you being part of this community and sharing the love, the L word that Lauren reminded me of today and all of us today. So Hugo, take it away.
Hello, everyone. Wow, this conversation, the discussions, also what's happening in the chat is amazing. So I'd like to also say thank you to all the speakers. It's great to have you here. Love bringing your insights, your experience, and also your energy this morning. If I can ask everyone that's on this call this morning, just to pop into the chat, what's the one best thing you can take away from this? Or if you've got more than one best thing, add a few if you like. And I'll just have a quick read through as they come through. So we've got Matt. Matt, good to see you all the way from Perth. I'm sure it's early morning there. Great event, awesome insights. Thank you. Oop, let me just Scarf model, Scarf for social. Brilliant. Building change capability as we deliver change. Love how Lauren added belonging to the social framework. So smart. Frozen middle. Yes, we love that too, Rajavi. When we heard about it from Lauren, like, yes, we have to speak about it. People will definitely be keen. Good thoughts, rebriefing leaders. Thanks everyone for the amazing conversations. Brilliant. And they just keep popping in. So I want to just, if Andrew, you could just jump to the last slide before we wrap up. Amazing. Cool, cool, cool. So everyone, if you're not part of the Space for Change group on LinkedIn, I do encourage you to join. We have the QR code on screen there right now. So if you pull up your phone, just scan it. Otherwise, if you don't have your phone ready, an email will go out with a link to join. In that group, we share when the next events are. We share what's happening. We share the insights from each session as well. So I encourage you to join if you're not already part of the group. And everyone that's registered today, you will get a link to the recording in case you came in late, in case you missed anything. So that'll be coming your way, as well as links to all, ways to connect with the speakers here. So if there's anything that you want to dive into deeper and you want to find out from any of the speakers, there'll be a way to connect with them. And lastly, what I'm also going to offer to the group here is that because there was such really good conversations happening in the chat, there were lots more questions popping up as well. What I'll do is I'll put a post up in the Space for Change group where it's ask the speakers. So in there, I'll tag the speakers there. And if you've got any questions that we weren't able to get to this morning, please pop them in and tag the speaker if it's specifically related to or targeted at a speaker. And I'll just remind them, hey, can you jump in, answer this question? And we'll make sure that we continuously feed through the insights, experience, the information that all of these speakers bring. So that'll be in the Space for Change group. And lastly, if there's anything else that you want to learn about, especially around the Change Accelerator course, learning change leadership, whatever that might be, reach out to us. We're here to help. And that's really what Space for Change has been all about ever since we launched it 3 years ago. It's about giving insights, experience, content back so we can really elevate what change is and bring that to the businesses, clients, and individuals that we work with. So Last thing I want to say is thank you again. It's been a pleasure having you here. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, your evening, your afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Thank you, guys.